everybody. So I'm just going to do a very short presentation about our school outreach program. So I'm going to talk a little bit about why we're doing this, what we have done so far, how you can participate if you want to, and we will go over a short sample lesson plan that I developed that you can use. We have a little toolkit that's in a Dropbox folder, so if you want to do school presentations, feel free to use that lesson plan. So I'm going to share the presentation now. Just 1 second. Not yet coming. Can
It's still in red. It's not in contact, yeah.
okay, now it's coming. Okay, just 1 second. So why are we doing this at all, you might ask? So we are actually one of the few NGOs who don't really target kids in Canada. There are a lot of other NGOs who are doing this already, World Vision, Right to Play, Water Aid, and of course Me2We. They all have dedicated staff and spend quite a bit of money of reaching kids. We don't do that. And as you all know, people who know us are mostly 40 years plus, know us through the traditional media. So this is really a missed opportunity, and we've been talking for a long time about trying to reach other audiences, younger audience as well. This is really a way of creating brand awareness from an early age and build loyalty with MSF. Some of you might have had some contact with NGOs when you were in high school. For me, for example, was Amnesty International, and I'm still a donor today. So you can never start too early. So the long-term goal is really to make MSF the charity and also the employer of choice in the future. So we might inspire people to work for us. And the short-term goal is to encourage students to do fundraisers, raising events, and so on. And as a secondary target group, we are also hoping to reach teachers and parents. I did presentations 2 weeks ago, for example, and the teachers actually asked a lot of questions about working for MSF. There seemed to be a lot of interest. And we also hope to engage association members, friends of MSF, and volunteers. What we have done so far, you might have seen our online school resources already. We put them online about a bit more than a year ago. If you haven't had a chance to look at them, please do so. So we have these toolkits for teachers. These are lesson plans that were developed by educators in Canada and Belgium. One major lesson plan focuses on refugees. The other one, actually is two lesson plans on refugees. The other one focuses on MSF and humanitarian work. We have resources for students, multimedia resources, so videos, online games, and so on. Ideas for students to get involved, book suggestions, and posters. And as a next step, we really want to engage students directly and go into schools more than we have done before. So we have always done speaking engagements through the association, but it has been not that well organized. Nobody really was keeping track of how many events have been happening, how many schools have been reached, how many students. And some association members have also been, or some coordinators have been reluctant because they get so many requests that schools have a little bit dropped. So this year the MT has really decided to make this a priority, and it's now going to be an office-led initiative instead of an association-led initiative. The goal is to reach 1,500 students this year. So one of the first things we have done this year is to send an email. Thank you to Rushika and other volunteers who've collected email addresses, which was very tedious, email addresses from teachers across Canada. So we sent them an email at the beginning of the year to tell them, okay, these are the resources there online. We can also organize speaking engagements for your students if you go through the Speakers Bureau. The response has not been overwhelming, actually. We have had so far 27 responses this year, which is not too many requests. Most of them in Ontario and British Columbia. What is new is that I'm handling the speaking requests from now on. So I'm trying to find speakers. I'm tracking it to have it a bit more organized in one place, so it makes it easier to track everything. What is also new is that speakers will be reimbursed for travel costs and other small costs such as printing, to really create an incentive for association members to do this, because some of the schools are not necessarily in the big cities. There can be 1 or 2 hours away from Toronto, Montreal, Vancouver, and so on. We also encourage staff members, that's why you're here, to do this, volunteers and friends of MSF. Obviously, the MT is very much behind it, but you need to discuss with your directors if you're allowed to take some time off from work to do it. This is a test run, so we want to see how it works, because obviously we don't have a full-time staff working with this. It's just me who does it very much part-time. So we want to see if it goes well, if there's a lot of interest, what the feedback is, and then maybe if it goes really well, we can go one step further. So this is a really test run this year. So as I mentioned, we're getting requests through the Speakers Bureau right now, but we also encourage all of you to reach out to schools in your network. So if you have friends who are teachers, or if you have kids yourself, or if you were a kid and you still have contact to your former high schools, reach out to the schools directly and offer to do presentations. I know, for example, Emily is doing this, for example, because Kathleen reached out to her brother, who is a high school teacher, and Emily has thankfully agreed to talk to that high school. So yeah, please do that. And also bear in mind that if a school is too far or you don't have the time, you can do it by Skype. So I'm actually doing this tomorrow as a bit of a test run with a school that is about 3 hours from Toronto, so it's really not really worthwhile driving there just to see 50 kids. But I'm going to do it by Skype, and this is really an option for association members as well, and maybe even from the field at one point. Okay, so to make life easier for everybody, I've developed a school presentation kit that's in a Dropbox. You should have received it in the invitation. If not, I can send it to you by email as well, the link. And it contains a number of things that you can use for your presentation if you want to. You're not forced to do it. The main things are what you can see with the arrow is a PowerPoint presentation, and here a lesson plan. So Rishika actually helped me to make it look nicer, a bit more organized. So this explains to you how to use the lesson plan. And
former teacher.
Yeah. She's a former teacher, so that's been very nice. It also contains 3 videos, introduction videos to MSF that you can use. It contains these printouts. Sorry, you can't see this now if you're online, but these are, I'll explain this later. So these are handouts that you can use for an interactive game where students can learn to be a team member of MSF and respond to humanitarian crisis situation. It also contains a feedback form, so I very much encourage people who do a school presentation to send me feedback afterwards. How did it go? What went well? What didn't go so well? How useful was the material? What can be improved? As I mentioned, it's a work in progress. It's learning by doing basically. So we really appreciate it if you can give us feedback. There's also an expenses claim form if you have any expenses, if you have to travel somewhere, if you have to print something, if you need to buy lunch because it's far away, these kind of things. And there's also a photo consent form if you are taking photos of the kids or of the teachers taking photos of you with the kids. We need consent from the parents if you want us to publish the photo on our website, which would be actually very nice for us also to promote this. Yeah, please take the form with you and give it to the teacher and make sure that the parents sign the consent form. Sorry. So the sample lesson plan focuses on introducing students to the work of MSF and what humanitarian work is in general. So it's a very, very basic introduction. So what is humanitarian work and what specifically is it that MSF does? So objectives, are they to give an introduction to both of those things and also to encourage students to become engaged and do something themselves to inspire them. As a note, the sample lesson plan is optional. So if you're a field worker, you might want to modify it and add your own slides, which are of course much more interesting for the students if you can talk about your own experience. Feel free to modify it as much as you like. It also depends on how long you have and how old the kids are. So this lesson plan is really targeted for kids from grades 6 to 12. It's not really that suitable for younger kids. The lesson plan also gives you options. There's some slides that are a bit more, they're better suited for older kids from grades 9 to 12. So it will give you that information in the lesson plan, so you can cut that out for younger kids. And as I mentioned, feel free to cut things, to move the order around, and so on. So to prepare the lesson plan, discuss with the teacher before about what you're going to talk about. Find out if the kids already know something about MSF. You might want to encourage them to look at videos before you come to the class. Get a sense about how old the kids are, how many kids you're going to talk to, and so on. Like 2 weeks ago, I talked to how many kids? About 200 kids at a Catholic school. They were pretty young. They were between grades 6 to 8, and I was absolutely impressed by how much they already knew, because I didn't know that the Catholic School Board has a chapter about MSF in their social science workbook. And I arrived there and they asked me, the first question was from an 11-year-old, do you know Joan Liu? And I said, yeah. This guy was totally impressed. It was almost like I talked about Justin Bieber or something like that. So they were really, really plugged in. They asked great questions. So sometimes it's amazing how much the kids know about us already. As I mentioned, adapt the lesson plan. If you want to ask the teachers about what kind of technical equipment they have, so you would need a laptop, a projector, and speakers if you want to show videos, for example, and print out the handouts. We're going to talk about that a bit later. During the lesson, encourage the students to ask as many questions as they want. Make it interactive, so it's not just it's not like talking to university students. So with high school students, you really want to engage them and ask them questions, get some feedback, and so on. Enjoy yourself. It's actually supposed to be fun. It is actually really, I find it really enjoyable to talk to kids. I hope you will find that as well. Afterwards, please fill in the feedback form, send it back to me, send me the expense claim form if you had any expenses, and the consent form if applicable. So now we're going to the actual PowerPoint presentation. So I'm going to go through it very, very quickly. Feel free to stop me if you have any questions. So this is like the introduction slide. You will introduce yourself. What is your name? What is your job at MSF? Sorry, do you have any questions? Yeah. So introduce yourself. If you were in a field, talk what your position in the field was, where you have worked before, and give a bit of an overview of what you're going to talk about. So you're going to give an introduction to what humanitarian crisis situations are, what humanitarian work is, and what MSF does, and you will end the session with an interactive role play where the students become a member of an MSF emergency team and have to respond to a crisis situation. Then you can ask the kids if they can think of any humanitarian emergencies. When Emily and I did it here in the office, so Doctors Without Borders kids, we gave them sticky notes, and they posted it on the wall. So they did kind of a brainstorming what kind of emergencies they can think of, like an earthquake in Nepal, and so on and so on. And then they presented it to the class. Or when I did it with the other classes, because we didn't have enough time, I just asked them, and the kids were raising their hands and gave some examples, and then you can go through the main types of emergencies that MSF works in. So of course there's natural disasters. So you can ask the students if they know what that is. Do you know what that is? Anyone here know what that photo is?
This one?
Yeah, it's the earthquake in Nepal. So that's one of the examples of where we would work, and you can ask them if they can think of other natural disasters they've heard of. Then another emergency situation is armed conflicts. Again, you would ask the kids if they know of any examples of where there are armed conflicts right now in the world. Then malnutrition. You can explain that the photo on the left shows an MSF nurse measuring the upper arm of a child, and we actually have this New York bands here in the office. You can take that to the presentation. It's also in the sample kit, in the toolkit. You can print it out as well and take it. The kids really love it. Pass it around in the class and explain that if you put it around the upper arm of a child and it shows red, it means the child is malnourished, and the kid needs special therapeutic food, which you can see on the right photo. So it's a mother and a child, and the child is eating plumpy nut. So you talk a little bit about what plumpy nut is, and the kids actually very very interested in that, and they ask a lot of questions about peanut allergy and all these things. Then talk about epidemics, ask the kids if they know what that photo is. Then talk a little bit about Ebola, and ask them if they can think of other epidemics they have heard of. This photo is about a refugee camp, an informal refugee camp in Lebanon, Syrian refugees. So you can ask the kids again if they can think of any situations, any other contexts where they've heard about refugees. And in this school, this Catholic school I went to, it turned out there were actually 10 out of the 200 kids were actually refugees themselves. So it's a good idea to maybe talk to the teacher before. Are there any kids who used to be refugees, and then they can talk a little bit about their own experience as well. This is a map that shows, so we have talked about all these crisis situations and around the world, and MSF is dealing with a lot of these crisis situations around the world, to be exact, in about 70 countries around the world. It's just amazing to see how many red spots we have on this map. More than half of our projects are in Africa, but we also have projects, as you can see here, in Mexico, and with migrants coming from Central America, for example. We even work in Russia on TB projects. We work in Europe with migrants and refugees and so on. So you can talk a bit about that. Okay, sorry. I'm just going through this presentation very, very quickly. Obviously, it's going to take a lot longer. This is an example. Now after you've done this introduction about what kind of humanitarian crisis hotspots there are and where they are, we talk about what kind of help do people need who are caught in a humanitarian crisis situations. So this is a photo of refugees from South Sudan in Tanzania. Sorry, I forgot. And so I've started with asking the kids. So can they describe the photo a little bit? What do they think this shows? It actually took them a while to recognize that this is a refugee camp. And then you can ask the kids, so imagine if that is you. You only have a few hours to flee from your home with your family. you have no time to pack anything. You arrive in a neighboring country without anything. So what do you need? So then you discuss with the kids, and they need shelter, they need food, they need water, malnutrition, and so on. So you talk about what kind of aid people need in a humanitarian emergency situation. And then you can talk about, and this is our specialty, so we've talked about all the things that people need. So the specialty of Doctors Without Borders is emergency medical aid. So other actors might focus on food or shelter and so on. So our specialty is medical aid for people caught in humanitarian crisis situations. This photo shows an oral vaccination campaign against cholera in Tanzania for refugees from Burundi. Then you can discuss with the kids. What is similar and what is different to, you've all been vaccinated here in Canada. Do you remember that? So what is similar and what is different to what you see here on this photo? So obviously it's outdoors, it's not inside a hospital. There's big lineups, and you can also talk about how people are very keen to get their kids vaccinated. They often walk for hours or even a day to get their kids vaccinated, and so on and so on. So you can talk a bit about that. Then you can discuss with the class. So what is actually humanitarian? And that I found that very interesting because MSF doesn't have a very good definition itself. I've written down a description here that you can use if you want to, but it's interesting to get feedback from the kids. Who are the people who are actually doing this work? Who are humanitarians? So if you want, you can read the definition that I put up here, but it's interesting to discuss what they feel humanitarian is and what kind of qualities they have on what they do. So the next slide talks about humanitarian principles. So this is something I've put up as an optional slide for all the kids. The kids were actually, I did it also with the 6 to 8 grades, and they were actually pretty good about it because they had already been prepared about MSF. They were pretty clear. They mixed up impartiality and neutrality a little bit, but other than that, they were actually pretty good. They even knew what independence meant. So you can discuss these principles with them to then know what that means and why is it important to have these principles. Then you could mention that something that sets us apart from other organizations is that we speak out. So we don't just give medical help, but if we see injustices or other things on the ground where we need change, we try to talk to decision makers on the ground, so we have discussions with people on the ground. But if that doesn't work, we also speak out publicly through the media, through international bodies. You can, as an example, you can talk about our international President Joan Liu, who is Canadian, talking at the UN Security Council about the fact that it's not okay to bomb hospitals in wars. And that we were so outraged about this that we even started a whole campaign here in Canada that has taken off worldwide called Not a Target. This shows our office staff here holding up the signs, and we are doing this to speak out against the attack on civilians and healthcare workers in conflict situations. And after this slide, I would show a video. There are 3 videos that I put in there. The one that I thought was most appropriate is called Welcome to MSF, because it's got a bit of a lighter tone, and it also repeats all the things we just talked about. So the main emergency contexts, the humanitarian principles, and the speaking out is all mentioned in this video, so it solidifies a little bit about what we talked about so far. And then after the video, you can see if the kids have any questions. And then we talk about who works for MSF. So this photo was taken in our office here in Toronto and shows photos of some of the Canadian field workers who have gone overseas, but actually Canadians are only a fraction of the people working for us. MSF is really a huge organization. We have on any given day about 36,000 people who work for us around the world, and what not many people know is that 90% of those people are local staff, people we have hired in the countries we work in, and the rest is international staff, such as Canadians. We have about 300 to 400 people who leave from Canada each year. And of course, everybody knows that we send doctors and nurses. That's evident from our name, but many people don't know that we need a big team of other job profiles who want to work for us. So here are just some of the job profiles we have. So we have logisticians, health promoters, water and sanitation specialists, and administrative officers. So you can talk a little bit about what those people do. And at this point, you have a choice of either continuing with the game we get into in a minute, or you can talk about your own experience in the field. So about, you can say, for example, I was a nurse in South Sudan and blah, blah, blah. So you can talk about this and show some slides. Or you can start with an interactive game with the kids, where they become MSF team members. So the reason I've chosen these 5 profiles is because that's what we have in these handouts. So here you can pass this around. So we have 5 job profiles. You divide the kids into groups, and so 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And give them a few minutes to, so everyone gets one of those job profiles and has to spend a few minutes reading through the description. And if you have a lot of time, the lesson plan also gives you links to videos that you can show about the different job profiles, so that they have a bit more of an in-depth understanding of what these people do. After they have spent some time, then of course you give them the option of asking questions to make sure they understood everything on the sheets, what their jobs are. And then afterwards you divide the class into groups. Each group has 5 members, and you send them on a Unitarian assignment. That means that each group gets one so-called crisis card. So there are 5 in total. If you have more than 30 kids in the class, you can just print out more of those cards. So the idea is that every group has 5 members, and they get one of those crisis cards, or natural disaster, armed conflict, epidemic, malnutrition, or refugee crisis. And then you give them 15 to 20 minutes time to work in a group to see how they're going to respond to this crisis. So they have to read the situation there's some together, and there's some tasks listed on the sheets of what they need to do. And so each member gives his or her own input. So for example, the logistician would think about, okay, what do we need to bring? The water and sanitation specialist would talk about, okay, what's the water and sanitation situation on the ground? Do we need to ship in water? Do we need to build toilets? And so on and so on. And the doctor thinks about the medical aspects. The health promoter would think about what kind of messages does the local population need. And then after this exercise, they come and do presentations and tell the rest of the class what their solution is. And it's actually really, really interesting sometimes. So when I did it here with Emily, there was school that was a bit more arts focused, and they had the refugee topic, and they said, oh, we really need to have evening programs for the refugees because we need to lift their spirits with this dance and theater. And I thought it's actually like a really brilliant idea because mental health is so important for refugees. So yeah, it's pretty interesting to see what the kids come up with. And then to finish this, so after the presentations, you finish the presentation by giving them suggestions of what they can do to be engaged, to be involved. First of all, one of the main things is really to stay informed, because a lot of kids don't really follow the news. I was actually a little bit surprised, even showing them some of the most common photos, for example, of the migrant rescue on those boats in the Mediterranean. A lot of kids had no idea what that was, so they obviously haven't seen it in the news. So that's really one of the things they can stay involved, is really stay informed, follow the news, follow our social media. So Facebook, of course, Twitter, we're on Instagram, we're on Snapchat. The kids were very excited about Snapchat. This is actually the icon here. I guess I need to scan it on their phone, right?
Yeah, it needs to be bigger for them to do that, but yeah.
Yeah, whatever. But so they were pretty, because kids are mostly on Instagram and Snapchat, not so much on Facebook and Twitter. Yeah, also encourage them to look at our resources for kids on the website. If they want to go one step further, they can also do awareness-raising events. They can, for example, write an article for the school newspaper. They could do photo exhibitions, artwork, and so on. They could, of course, organize fundraisers, and they can even work for us when they're older. And as they've found out, we don't only need doctors and nurses, we need all kinds of people who work for us. And they can stay in touch. So we have actually a generic email address, schools@msf.ca. We have the same in French, école at msf.ca, and yeah, so the kids can, and the teachers can send feedback and can stay in touch. Yeah, I forgot to mention we have the same materials in French as well. The presentation kit will be translated by next week. So yeah, it can be used in French as well. And yeah, just one small thing about personalizing the presentation. For example, tomorrow I'm going to do a Skype presentation, so it's a bit more difficult to do the interactive game. So I'm just going to talk about personal stories. So, for example, I spent some time in an IDP camp in South Sudan, and I'm going to talk about one person I met there who really touched me. He was a nutrition assistant in the camp, working with malnourished babies, and he was actually an IDP himself, and yeah, so he had to flee the violence, was separated from his family for 3 weeks, and finally found out there in this camp. Then he was reunited with the family, with 5 kids. The youngest one was actually born in the camp before he even got there. So yeah, talk a little bit about what the situation is like. The food situation is pretty bad. All they get is lentils every day, so the kids are pretty fed up with the food they're getting. The 3 girls have their own little tent. They're super bored because they have no school, no toys, and they need to work, so they have to fetch water. They have to walk like 10-15 minutes to get water from a communal water tap. So this girl is 10 years old. It weighs like 15 kilos or something, so this kid has to carry this several times a day just to make sure her family has water. The toilets are 15 minutes away, you know, very, very basic toilets, and the girls are really scared of going there at night because there's no light in the camp, and it's pretty scary to go there, so they're very worried because diarrhea is a big problem in the camp, and so they're very scared of being sick and having to go there by themselves at night. And you know, the situation is really bad because when it rains, everything's underwater. So yeah, it's not a very nice environment for children. So if you have any kind of stories like that, so it's just like a small example, but if you have any personal stories, I think the kids really appreciate that as well, if you can talk about that. Sorry, so now I've talked a lot. Do you have any questions?
Yeah, that's good.
So as I said, you know, it's learning by doing. Every time when I've done it, I've modified it a little bit. It really depends on how the kids react, and sometimes you have to simplify it a bit, or sometimes you notice, oh, they're really like this young kids. I thought I really had to really simplify it, and they were so well informed. This grade 6 to 8 kids, so that I could even put it up a notch. So it really depends a bit on the kids. And yeah, so if anyone is interested, I have a request that just came in that I haven't filled yet on April 5th, if anyone wants to do that. It's a Social Awareness Day in Etobicoke.
Think about it.
Yeah.
But I like the French ones.
The French, yeah, there's quite a few French ones. And what is also nice now, we had a few really big requests, like 2 model UN high school conferences, which is really nice. Yeah, a lot of these speaking requests, which I didn't really realize before, are actually assemblies. So they just group all these kids together. So at one point I had like 200 kids. And so it's actually not bad, because then you can really reach a lot of kids at the same time, and we still, yeah.
Hard to be interactive.
Yeah, interactive. Actually, 200 were in 2 groups, so like 100 each, and we just managed. We did this game with them. Then obviously only 2 or 3 did a presentation afterwards. But yeah. But for field workers, I would really, I think they would really appreciate if you tell your own stories. Maybe you can start with a big picture. You know, what is humanitarian work? Because a lot of times kids don't really know what does it even mean. And then so start with a big picture, and then talk about your own. In your case, you can really talk about your own experience. It's like. Yeah, but you know, you can talk about notes. This is also a job profile.
Can I just make a few comments?
Yeah.
I would cycle a few things. It's wonderful. It's been good fun working with you on the curriculum design and development end of things. I would cycle. If I were to present, I would feel quite strongly about cycling back at the end of the presentation to why MSF exists, why in fact NGOs, whether they're delivering medical emergency relief or other kinds of relief exist, because the governments in these countries, they do exist. These people are citizens, and they have limited agency. So if we could touch on that to underscore the fact that these aren't helpless, especially because there are many pictures here of black children, black women, black men, and being offered service by non-black people.
Oh, I actually try to have like a local
because children have already a set of prejudices and biases, and particularly with the images of the last.
Asian, I don't know. Actually, I did try to find.
But like Western, Northern and Southern Western areas, so that's like, it's an issue, especially if you're going to schools with like a large degree of diversity, and it's like, well, if I'm like, if I'm like one of the people who looks more like the helpees than the helpers, then I might have some sensitivity to the presentation.
And also to emphasize, yes.
Yeah, I did actually try to have mostly local staff.
Not to work, but I like when you emphasize that 90%, like there are some key facts that you've shared with us today. 90% of the staff are from the local communities. They're Sudanese, South Sudanese themselves. So if that could be emphasized. Visuals are very powerful, as we know. And I would really give students an opportunity, whether you're delivering this presentation to 100, 200, or merely 20 students, for them just to pause on these images and to understand that it's literally just a square, and there's a whole town, city, country, to really emphasize this is a snapshot, and we've come to this point where we're all assembled out there, not because we're, really emphasize that it's a shitty situation because it needn't be this way, but in the meantime, it is, and that's where MSF has stepped in.
Yeah, well, that's why we talk about emergency, right? It's emergency situations.
Yeah.
It's,
but it might be helpful to kind of like add these as specific points to stress for presenters, just so that we don't come off as the white saviors.
Yeah.
So so that's why I've put the presentation tips that I've helped you. Just that we could work on that. But because these images are powerful and they will stay with students. And regarding humanitarian, just this one last comment, because we all have children or teenagers in our lives. No less, we've been children and teenagers at one point. But this emphasis on also being a humanitarian, there are students very much in the classroom or gymnasium where you present who have humanitarian impulses or who just before the assembly may have told off a really annoying person in line to get their mucky hands off their friend. That is that humanitarian impulse that most people have, even as young as 4 and 5 and 6. But that's not the target audience. But just to make that connection between you yourself are humanitarian, you do character education in this school. Every day, in a given hour, there's a teacher or a colleague or a staff member saying, that's not the way we need to be speaking to each other. In virtually every school, there's a conversation around character, how we need to treat one another. So that ties in
that's
nicely
why
with
with the
humanitarian.
humanitarian. That's why the discussion about the humanitarian versus the humanitarian.
Yes, which is brilliant. Because we all. Forgive me for speaking so quickly. I have to. I have to run, but I wanted to emphasize that you've got a brilliant presentation that can go in many directions, and I love that you insist that no matter who takes this up, whether it's a volunteer educator like myself, that we can adapt it. Like I love that you're emphasizing that.
Definitely needs to. Everyone can adapt it. Everyone has their own.
Yes.
I would like to add
it's just a suggestion to make it a bit easier for people.
Because kids have no context for any of this. We have to provide so much context because they don't know any of this.
Yeah,
So.
that's why I thought start with a big picture. So what are emergencies and why do people need help? That's why,
That's a good point. I want to just add one thing to what you're saying. Like, you did say, well, like, okay, most of the countries we work as is mostly Africa and Southeast Asia. We're mostly there. We're mostly in Africa and Southeast Asia. But that's beside the point. The point here is for kids here to know that MSF at some point, if we need to step in Canada and do something, we would, just like we did in New York City.
Yeah.
We actually work in New York City. For them to see that, it's important. For them not to feel like, okay, you know what, I'm from Sudan, and now I feel singled out. And I'm a little ashamed right now around my friends thinking, okay, people come and help me. No, they can also help people in New York City, just like the kids that are in the same classroom.
Okay, you can add some line about that, maybe even the beginning.
Yeah, maybe the New York City example, you can actually illustrate that. Say, okay, we're actually working in Japan, working in New York City after the.
Or Europe.
Yeah, or Europe.
Well, it's basically like it's the government's responsibility to provide healthcare, but the government can't do that everywhere, all the time, in every situation. And there are some situations where there are gaps exist, and that's why we exist. That's why we're there.
Yeah.
People helping people. But it's a little more complicated than that and highly political. But it comes down to people helping people.
Yeah, I can add something at the beginning. Maybe it's a good idea.
Yes.
Yeah, as I mentioned, please send me feedback, whatever, I'm not an educator.
So basically context and framing is like the major piece of feedback.
Yeah, okay.
The visuals are powerful. They each tell their own story. We don't know how it's being processed by each pair of eyes in the room when we assemble.
Well, I think that's an issue with a lot of the MSF pictures, is that there's kind of one white person surrounded by a bunch of non-white people, but I think
I tried to get mostly
I was going to say, I think
she's
Asian, you chose some really good pictures.
Central Asia.
And of course, because I did notice that in a lot of your pictures it wasn't like that.
Yeah.
There were a few that were, but a few that weren't, which is I think accurate.
But
It's really hard. It's not just race, and it's not just photos. It's not just race.
It's also the concept that
It's
also the concept that the practices that we use are from the West. So it doesn't mean it doesn't matter if the health worker is from South Sudan.
Yeah.
It's just that we're using Western practices in a different context, and we're bringing things like vaccination that some people I've never even seen, and they sometimes even see white people for the first time or see vaccination for the first time. They're like, what is this thing that they're giving us?
Yeah.
Like, what is it? Not everybody knows and understands this thing, and they're trusting us. they're like, okay, you know what? They sold this to us, we're gonna go for it, and that's okay. So it's for us to show that, okay, this is something that we're willing to do anywhere, not just on certain contexts.
And those conversations, I mean, if the presentation goes in that direction, heck, I personally would go with it, because that is probably the most powerful, that is something that they will, that at least half of the students will go, yeah, they'll leave going, it may leave an even deeper impression and have implications in how they see many things, like the Indian chap who runs a convenience shop down the street, and just many. There is, yes, particularly given the context we live and work in.
I have a question.
Yeah.
Okay, so when the schools submit their requests, do we guarantee that we'll be able to find someone to present to them?
No, that's also what I said. You know, sometimes they're really remote places. And, thank you for coming.
Of course.
So it's a bit of an issue. So that's why tomorrow I'm doing this with Skype, because we couldn't find anybody. Okay. We can't guarantee it. No.
Do we guarantee someone will Skype in, or
we can't guarantee. I said that right from the beginning. That we can't guarantee. We try our best, but that's why I hope to get some more friends of MSF as maybe also involved. But friends of MSF is probably more their own personal connections. I wouldn't do the formal speaking requests. I would only use staff and workers for that. Okay. Yeah, we have a few staff members now who have volunteered. Michael is doing a presentation. Emily is doing one. Carol is doing the UN Model Conference.
Okay, sure. I'm kind of interested in how many requests come from different areas. Sort of curious about that.
Yeah, I don't know why most of them seem to have come in from Ontario.
That's because most of the country lives in Ontario.
Yeah, I guess. Yeah, I'm surprised that we didn't get so many. We only got one from Montreal, which really surprises me. I thought I would have expected more from Quebec.
How long was the time between the response and
it was pretty
how busy
fast,
the teachers might
like
be?
within 2 or 3 weeks afterwards. But they still some coming in. Like one came in today, one came in on Friday. So I don't know. Yeah, and BC also a lot. Yeah. In some are very remote areas, and one is actually really cool. It's really in the middle of nowhere, but we have a nurse who's doing outreach, who's doing work by coincidence in the same neighborhood. And so she can combine it. It's just an hour from where she works as a remote nurse. So.
Thanks so much.
Well, thank you.
Yeah,
if you're interested. Is anyone on online who has any questions?
Is someone on the internet who wants to talk to us?
The World Wide Web?
No, I think that's it.
Okay, thank you very much.
So you're saying something?